Okay guys, you asked for it, you got it. Let's take a look at the gentle art of making enemies. I'm really looking forward to this one. In the previous installment of Best of Gotham, I took a look at Smile Like You Mean It, which brought us the ceremonious return of Jerome Valeska. And to be honest, rewatching it for the sake of the video did show me some issues I had with the episode that I didn't really remember having before. I guess context changes things a bit. I have my issues with the indulgent quoting of the Jerome constantly, and the logic of how citizens of Gotham commit to Jerome. Now, I have had some comments along the lines of, "Wall, you don't even understand. It's not like they look at Jerome and go mad, it's that Jerome inspires them to embrace their darkest sides." Ultimately, this doesn't change the fact that this is still a massive reach. Jerome has not earned this as a character, and no part of his story prior to this has earned the idea of Jerome easily inspiring madness like that, because Jerome has not earned it. What he has earned, however, is a place in the Joker Hall of Fame, because this portrayal of a Joker-like character is so good that scenes including Cameron Monaghan's Jerome could redeem an otherwise mixed bag of an episode. I think the cult of Jerome should have instead been the cult of the Maniacs, and they wanted to revive Jerome as some kind of mascot. The Maniacs were a collective, and together unknowingly could have produced that philosophy of chaos together, and then, in this story, we could include Jerome ascending the Maniac status, coming into his very own, like he does, but, without the recognition of him ascending the Maniac status. Very little really needs changing here. The cult could gradually grow more enthusiastic about Jerome than the Maniacs to begin with, and then cementing Jerome's philosophy more gradually as opposed to, "Oh, I saw that guy on TV, now I'm evil." With all that said, let's check out the continuation of this story, The Gentle Art of Making Enemies, which I do recall being one of my all-time favourite episodes. So prior to the events of this episode, Jerome's been resurrected by his own cult, Barbara Keene and Tabitha Gallivan have been working with Ed Nygma to destroy the Penguin over the death of Isabella, and Jerome is setting out to kill Bruce Wayne, unleashing his followers upon a Gotham swamped in darkness. The episode begins with the GCPD apprehending a massive number of Jerome's followers, and chaos is just erupting. Violence, damage, Molotovs flying around. Jim Gordon needs to find Jerome as soon as possible to put a stop to this. So we return to Penguin, who believes he's rescuing Ed Nygma at Kane Chemicals. Ed walks up to Penguin and reveals that it's all a setup, killing Penguin's goons and preparing to kill Penguin. Ed shows Penguin the car that Isabella was killed in. Ed reveals that he is going to kill Penguin for revenge. Meanwhile, the Court of Owls watch over the dark Gotham City with looting and crime going on across the city as they evaluate the situation. Meanwhile, Jim Gordon and Harvey Bullock try to determine when order will be restored to Gotham, so Jim Gordon sets out to gather information about Jerome's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Penguin is being tied to the car that Isabella was murdered in as he pleads for his life to Nygma. We realize that the hallucination of Penguin's father that we saw in the prior episode was thanks to Nygma defiling his father's grave and then placing the remains in a dumpster. Penguin admits to killing Isabella finally, out of love for Ed. Penguin reminds Ed how he murdered Kristen Kringle, the same was destined to happen to Isabella. Ed reminds Penguin of who he really is, someone willing to sacrifice anybody to save himself, and that love is all about sacrifice, therefore Penguin is incapable of love. So Nygma demonstrates that he's suspended a vat of highly corrosive acid above the Penguin that is due to drop as soon as the ice connecting the chains together is melted. Penguin promises to change, and Nygma shows no sympathy. I just want to point out how absolutely fantastically handled this subplot is. It really brings us a full distinction between the Penguin and Nygma's personalities, and how the two function. Meanwhile, Jim Gordon goes to speak to Lee Tompkins to ask about the whereabouts of Jerome. I must admit, Lee is pretty unlikable in this sequence. Yeah, she touches on Jerome's whereabouts, but uses it as an excuse to rag on Jim Gordon some more. Like, lady, where are your priorities at? But at least she suddenly remembers that Jerome was going off to find Bruce Wayne. So meanwhile at Wayne Manor, Bruce and Alfred are trying to get their backup power generators up and running, until the phone rings, which ends up being just a distraction for an unwanted guest to announce his arrival. Jerome is here. And I think this sequence is the sequence that ultimately proves the whole "they are two incomplete Jokers" theory to be complete and utter BS. Oh sure, Jerome lacked the intelligence of Jeremiah. Yeah, you think so? Let's go through this then. So, Jerome's followers start looting Wayne Manor while Jerome and Bruce share an exchange. Jerome happens upon a glass owl statue that Bruce and Alfred have been using as a tool in the mystery of the Court of Owls. It's pretty integral to the story, but Jerome wants it. Bruce bluffs, telling Jerome that it's worthless, so Jerome throws the statue onto the carpet, knowing that it's pretty soft, which causes Bruce and Alfred to panic in that moment. Now Jerome knows what it's really worth, and smashes it onto the tiles, shattering it.
But no, Jerome was just stupid. He was just a flash-in-the-pan villain with no sense of intelligence whatsoever.
Gimme a G, guys. Gimme a T, gimme an F, and gimme an O. What does that stand for? Get the frick out. So Jerome reveals to Bruce that he's here to kill him, and finish the work from before he died. Cameron Monaghan really indulges in this dialogue. He's about as jokery as can be. Bruce proves his own cunning here, making a point of his own social status and acknowledging Jerome's showmanship. Bruce belittles Jerome's plan to kill him in his own home. Jerome tries to bring himself to kill Bruce, but ultimately breaks under Bruce's criticism, encouraging Bruce to elaborate. This is about as Joker as it gets. Bruce really bigs himself up and commands an audience for his own death.
Oh, but Jerome's stupid. He just give in.
No, Jerome is taking a gamble for the sake of fun, and he's fully aware of that. It's his fatal flaw and a known fatal flaw of the Joker. He can't just be some unstoppable Gary Stu of a villain. He has a weakness, and it's his sense of showmanship and how much importance he places on it. Jerome tells Bruce that he's aware that he's only buying his time and agrees to take Bruce to the circus for his public death. Jerome instructs his goons to kill Alfred in Wayne Manor as Bruce and Alfred say their goodbyes. Jerome comments on the intimacy and requests his goons to keep the couch clean because he wants it. So back at Kane Chemicals, Penguin's demise looks imminent. We see drops of acid melting the car between Penguin's legs as he panics. An officer finds Penguin, and the Penguin asks the officer to cut him loose. The officer asks Penguin what he did to end up tied up, and unties Penguin just in the nick of time before the acid falls. It's a pretty comedic sequence. They really do like to stretch out the suspense of this sequence by having the officer kind of play dumb. And then back at Wayne Manor, we see Alfred being attacked by Jerome's followers. Alfred taunts them, ready for battle. It turns out he's just distracting them from Jim Gordon, who guns them down, as Jim and Alfred fight the cult of Jerome side by side. Alfred even gets a kill on his hands. Once again, Gotham's Alfred is best Alfred. So we follow Bruce and Jerome into the circus as Jerome takes Bruce on a little tour of his very own twisted fairground. It's got, you know, the usual carnival games like throwing balls and darts at a target, shooting games, except here, the targets are actually just innocent people begging for mercy. We see a game of whack-a-mole, which is now called Cracking Skulls, where the moles are innocent people. We do see some blood fly off-screen, implying a person has most definitely died in this. This is some of the darkest visual stuff Gotham has done, which I feel cements Jerome as the best Joker we've had in live action. This is some pretty R-rated stuff, and combined with Cameron Monaghan's very cartoonish performance, it really gives us the whole package. You hear that, guys? The whole package. Not 50% of it that requires some twin brother twist to complete the 100. The whole freaking package. I know I'm bringing this up a lot, but I will elaborate on why a little later on. So, Alfred is taken to the GCPD and questioned about Bruce's potential whereabouts. Harvey brings a list of potential locations, including the Boardwalk Circus, which gets Jim's interest as Jerome was raised in a circus. The GCPD give chase, but Alfred isn't just waiting around, he goes with them. Jerome treats Bruce to some face painting, criticizing Bruce's clown skills. It looks like Jerome is about to slash Bruce's throat, but instead he stabs one of his own followers, sticking his finger in the wound and using the blood to paint a frown on Bruce's face. Pretty similar to the banned Batgirl cover, which features the Joker painting a smile onto Batgirl. So Oswald returns to his home, commanding his goons take down Enigma, but it turns out that Butch and Tabitha have been waiting for him. They ask for Ed's location, and it turns out that Butch isn't working for anybody but himself, which Penguin mocks. Tabitha defends Butch and reminds Penguin of the time that she killed his mother. Butch knocks out Penguin and the two take him hostage. Back at the carnival, Bruce questions Jerome's motivations for a moment, and the Jerome contagion in this moment actually works. Jerome explains to Bruce that all over Gotham there are people that desire to do sadistic things and enact evil deeds to innocent people, and all that anybody really needs is simply an excuse. This is a dark territory that does feel actually plausible, and it actually works here because Jerome has successfully eliminated all order in the city anyway. It's not just literally him doing some things and saying some things and then everyone follows him. So, Jerome plays a game of Drop-A-Punk, which is like the classic carnival game which involves hitting a target with a ball and then the victim drops into water. This time the guy is begging for his life though, as there are piranhas in the water. They did a superb job bringing Jerome's Carnival of Death to life. There's seriously some imagination that's gone into making this a horror show. Jerome attempts to play and throw the ball, but is interrupted by Bruce attempting to explain to Jerome that good people still exist in Gotham, which Jerome finds hilarious, telling Bruce that Gotham has no heroes. We hold the shot on Bruce as the music swells. We all know who he's destined to be, and the filmmaking makes a good point of that. Bruce decides to prove Jerome wrong and pushes Jerome as he attempts to throw the ball, saving the life of the victim. But Only for now, as Jerome decides to press the target, dropping the man into the piranhas as he dies a grueling death that we see on screen pretty graphically. Man, this feels like a really good horror movie, and Jerome actually makes a seriously good horror character. I remember I was saying that Cameron Monaghan would have made a good fit for the voice of Chucky in the reboot, but that would have been providing they actually took cues from what Chucky is as opposed to just making a brand new character and calling it Chucky. I know your games, Hollywood. So Jerome needs to take just a moment to staple part of his face back on as Bruce recognizes the pain that Jerome is clearly in. Jerome decides to demonstrate this to Bruce, putting staples into Bruce's wrist. Bruce barely bats an eyelid as the music swells and Cameron Monaghan's facial acting gives us a knowing look of surprise, realizing that Bruce is something more than he had anticipated. Screw the finale, this is the moment where Batman and the Joker really met. Jerome manages to break Bruce though, as he asks Jerome to stop. The main event is now afoot. The GCPD rock up at the circus as they contemplate their next move. Their backup is delayed by a riot elsewhere in the city, and there's only 3 of them for now. Inside the main circus arena, Jerome's arrival is announced as Jerome rocks up in his iconic ringleader outfit and bows to his audience, getting them excited for the main event. After the applause ends, one follower continues to cheer, and Jerome has him shot and tells him to shut up. Jerome unveils Bruce Wayne to his audience, cuffed to a wooden pole. Jerome has a lot of quotable dialogue once again. Shall we end this night with a bang, or better yet, a boom? A giant cannon is brought up to point-blank range of Bruce as the crowd chant for Bruce's death. Jerome places a cannonball inside, as well as a bucket of knives, as well as a bucket of what I think are needles. Now, if Bruce were any normal kid, not the prospective Batman of Gotham, he would be done for. Don't go trying to tell me that Jerome wasn't smart or cunning enough to be the Joker. Jeremiah couldn't even drop a kid in some acid. Like, yeah, Jerome and Jeremiah both failed to destroy Gotham, but at least Jerome had some fun in the process. So Bruce pulls the staples out of his wrists to pick the locks in his handcuffs, as Jerome indulges his audience. Alfred, Gordon, and Bullock find Jerome and break up the event as the place is raided. Jerome wastes no time in lighting the cannon, preparing for it to fire. Bruce almost escapes until he drops the staple. Man, it looks as though Bruce is done for, but he escaped just in the nick of time. Alfred and Gordon approach the wooden pole to see that Bruce is nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, at the Sirens Bar, Barbara confronts the Penguin as she reveals her plan to the Penguin and that she successfully reshuffled power in her favor. And the final part of the plan is to kill Penguin. Back at the carnival, the Joker, Jerome, is looking for Bruce Wayne. He chases him into the Hall of Mirrors, which is a superb location for the final showdown, as it means we get some very surreal shots of Jerome, and to see Bruce utilize the mirrors as an early display of the Batman's stealth manipulation. It's time for Bruce and Jerome to throw down. But first, back at the Sirens Bar, Barbara commands Penguin to call Nigma to inform him that he made it out alive, for his life. Penguin realizes that Ed was right about him. He is incapable of love. Penguin states that he'd rather die than give up Ed Nigma, but unfortunately, Ed is here, without Penguin realizing it, and all of them are in cahoots. Back at the circus, Jerome is having a lot of fun searching for Bruce. Jerome gives Bruce his chance to be a hero and drops the gun while secretly holding a knife. Bruce takes his moment to strike Jerome while his guard is down. The two battle it out, and Jerome's fight is suitably very jokery, with him swinging fisticuffs around. Bruce manages to beat him into submission. This felt like a historical moment, and certainly should have been. Batman and the Joker's very first fight, but we all know how that turned out in the end. Bruce beats Jerome's face into a swollen pulp and even contemplates stabbing him in the throat with a shard of glass until he looks into the mirror and sees himself. The clown makeup on his face, the blood around his mouth, preparing to kill. In that moment, Bruce sees the Joker. But I guess that's all a bit cheapened now, isn't it? Jerome eggs Bruce on to finally deliver judgment unto him and kill him, but Bruce refuses, instead showing mercy. What makes this that bit greater is that Jerome wins either way. If Bruce kills him, Jerome unleashes the darkness in Bruce once and for all. If Bruce doesn't, he gets to live to be the monster he's destined to be. Wait, never mind. Bruce and Alfred are reunited and share a brotherly embrace. It's a moment of warmth in an otherwise ridiculously dark episode. Jim Gordon watches on and takes a moment to appreciate the moment, until Jerome staggers out with his face falling off, about to kill Bruce. Jim Gordon finally punches Jerome's face off, and the look of sheer shock on Gordon's face as Jerome's face flies off. I absolutely love this. The last time Jim Gordon saw Jerome, he was a maniac. Now he's a literal monster. This could have been the perfect turning point for the cult of the Maniacs to become the cult of Jerome. Just one little detail could have made Smile Like You Mean It and the Gentle Art of Making Enemies the perfect story. Jerome is arrested and sent to Arkham Asylum, but once his face is sewn back on. Harvey jokes about Jim Gordon punching a face off, literally, but Jim has other things on his mind. He wants to make things right with Lee. Harvey offers to buy him breakfast. Back at Wayne Manor, Alfred cleans Bruce's wounds as Bruce is suffering from some trauma from what happened. Alfred expresses his pride in the fact that Bruce didn't kill Jerome, and at this point we establish Batman's golden rule. Batman will not kill, no matter how correct it feels. The episode establishes Bruce's distinction between justice and vengeance, and what better villain to set this up than the Joker? I mean, never mind. Whatever, I guess not. Back at the Court of Owls, the court reflect on what a close call this whole thing was as they prepare their secret weapon, the Bruce clone. Oh boy, things are about to get boring. Back at the GCPD, Jim Gordon takes a moment to relax after the events until a knock on the door is heard. It's Jim Gordon's Uncle Frank, who works for the Court of Owls. We return to Gotham Harbor for a standoff between Ed and Penguin. Penguin is held at gunpoint as he confesses his love for Ed Nigma. As Penguin tries to manipulate Ed, Ed pushes through it all, finally shooting Penguin in the stomach and pushing him into the harbor. We watch Penguin sink into a bloody sea, heartbroken, and finally defeated. A really shocking ending. So, does the gentle art of making enemies fare up better than Smile Like You Mean It? Definitely. Much of the problems present in the previous episode are not here. There's no overly self-indulgent dialogue this time, the cult are a bit more in the background, Jerome takes center stage, and we focus a great deal on the character dynamics between Jerome and Bruce, as well as Ed and Penguin. Two of the best character dynamics in the whole dang show. Character stuff takes the forefront this time, with a great deal of well-thought-out creativity. This episode is one of the few Season 3 episodes to actually approach its more larger-than-life subject matter with some actual credibility. Is this one of Gotham's best episodes? Absolutely yes. The gentle art of making enemies is phenomenal, and not just because of Jerome, although Jerome is absolutely the best thing in the story. It's full of action, suspense, and we really see a formative experience for Batman and the Joker. Or so it should have been. Episodes like this make the Joker twin brother twist that bit more frustrating. As I said in the previous video, there's a lot of creative ideas that could have been implemented to throw viewers off of the scent of Jerome possibly becoming the Joker, but instead, a character with a rich history in Gotham was just swapped out for a blank copy. Jerome proved a cunning leader, even if he did end up imprisoned, with his plan to cripple Gotham failed. Ultimately, he still succeeded, because Jerome is a character destined to get the last laugh, unlike Mr. Batarang Head, who ended his last battle with Bruce kicking and panicking without even laughing. That's the thing they ultimately missed in the end. You can foil his plans, but ultimately there is no defeating the Joker. He can never lose because he takes far too much pleasure in the process of any endeavor for it to go to waste. Jerome is a character that would die with a smile on his face. Jeremiah, on the other hand, is so goal-focused that if he fails, he throws a tantrum or just takes a moment to revel in disappointment. Jerome in stories like The Gentle Art of Making Enemies is just a reminder that we got it so damn right the first time, and we never really saw this amalgamation of the two that we were promised come together in the finale because there simply wasn't enough time. It's a shame to see the thematic weight of this story so cheapened over time, but the episode is so dang good that, to be honest, it really doesn't lose any of that on rewatch, and thank Christ for that. After this episode, though, Season 3 took a total nosedive for me with interest, with the one saving grace being the Riddler and Penguin's character dynamic. We resumed the repetitive Tetch virus storyline, and I was honestly bored by the Court of Owls stuff. I've had people ask me why I didn't like the episode Heavy Dirty Soul, which was the finale of Season 3, and I guess I can elaborate on this a bit more once I've finally rewatched it. But my issue with Heavy Dirty Soul was that I simply wasn't invested in the Tetch virus storyline, and this story was the ending of that. I didn't like how soapy the relationship between Jim and Lee had become, and this episode was the culmination of that. And then at the last minute, League of Shadows were thrown in. Just more villains on top of an episode that was already crammed with too many villains, to be honest. And those villains just ended up being cannon fodder for the most part. It's not a terrible episode by any means, but it's definitely my least favourite finale, although the beginning is not much better. Season 3 was definitely a low point for Gotham for me. I can see why people loved it. It really tried to tell a Gotham story on a blockbuster scale, but that's another thing. For me, I mean, put it this way, have you ever noticed how much better Gotham is when it doesn't try to dial the odds up to 100? Season 3 sees Gotham engulfed in a virus and controlled by a tyrannical underground society. Season 5 sees Gotham become a post-apocalyptic wasteland. For me, those are the two worst seasons. Season 5 significantly worse than 3, admittedly. Season 1, however, is all about a growing war between mafia families in Gotham, and Season 2 is all about the rise of Gotham's underworld. This show is at its best when it's throwing not absolutely everything at the fan, in my opinion. Anyway, this video has gone a lot longer than I'd really, anticipated. What it boils down to is that the gentle art of making enemies was a shining moment for Season 3. So, what episodes would you like me to look at next? Comment below and discuss. And as always, if you've enjoyed this video and you want more like it, subscribe for all things Gotham. And in the description below are links to the Patreon, where we can make this channel bigger and better, as well as a link to the Discord server, where you can come and discuss all things Gotham with some friends and more. Coming up next is the trailer for my fan film, The Marvelous Tales of Spider-Man, so please do check that out as a lot of love has gone into it. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and have a great day.
No, what about it?
It's cancelled, dude.
For real?
You didn't get the notification?
No, I didn't.
Oh, well, it's cancelled.
Yeah, well, I came all this way for nothing then. Hey, you wanna hang out?
No.
I just heard there was a gunman. Tracy, you gotta get out of there. Tracy? Tracy.
Okay, so I guess the best advice I could give to anybody is this. Evaluate your circumstances, be brave. Be prepared to fail, but always get up. You owe it to yourself to be marvelous, so why regret being anything less? Well said. I'll see you around, buddy.